Yeah, some risks, sure, you can see them coming. Others you can predict and prepare for. Hi everyone, I'm David Scranton, and thanks for clicking on today's video. You know, we all want to live a long, healthy life. However, statistics say that if we live long enough, most of us will require some form of long-term care eventually. Now, accepting this reality and preparing for it are both important. And unfortunately, too often people are reluctant to do either. And that's why today we're going to talk about how to prepare for long-term care. We'll cover why you shouldn't neglect the subject and why, unfortunately, a lot of people do. Also, different types of long-term care coverage, whether it's self-pay or through insurance. Ways to pay for long-term care, and steps you can take to start preparing now. So let's start with why this is so incredibly important. Because today people are living longer and healthier lives than ever before. Some manage to make it through their 80s and their 90s, or even close to 100 while still living wholly independent lives. And you know, we all want to think that that will be us, but you can't count on it. According to a recent study, about 70% of Americans who live past age 65 will require some form of long-term care. Now, it may be temporary to recover from an illness or injury, or it may be a more permanent situation in the final years of your life. In either case, there are two important reasons to prepare. First, you want to have options for the type and the quality of coverage that you receive. And second, it'll be costly. And most of that cost will not be covered by insurance or Medicare. You know, long-term care will be expensive if you need it 5 years from now, but far more expensive if you need it 10 or even 20 years from now. Why? Because healthcare inflation rises at a much faster rate than the general rate of inflation. Long-term in-home healthcare that might cost $150,000 today while you're in your 60s might cost more than twice that by the time you get in your 80s and 3 or 4 times that by the time you get in the late 80s or early 90s. And this is one of the main reasons that people are reluctant to address the topic and why even those who do address it may end up underprepared. So how can we avoid that pitfall? One way is knowing all your options and understanding that the better prepared you are, the more options you might have. Of course, money isn't the only determining factor when it comes to long-term care, right? Because your state of health and specific needs will also play a role. The option people usually think of first when it comes to permanent long-term care is a nursing home, right? And no one wants to end up living in a nursing home. In some cases, though, it might be the only option. But in other cases, if you don't need full-time medical care, but still can't live completely independently, you might choose an assisted living facility. Unsurprisingly, the option most people would like to choose is home health care. You might just be able to do that if your health allows it, and especially if you're able to afford qualified help. And that might be a professional home health aide, or if necessary, a skilled nurse. Now, unfortunately, this is the option least likely to have any insurance coverage. Remember, insurance and Medicare coverage for any type of long-term care is extremely limited. So what are your options for paying for long-term care? The first one, obviously, is your savings. And most people, yes, they do end up paying for most of their long-term care needs out of pocket. So the more you can save and accumulate over your life to cover the costs, then the sooner you can start saving, the better off you'll be in the long run. But how much you save is only part of the equation, because equally as important is how you save. In other words, the savings and investment strategies you use throughout retirement and even before. Now, another option, of course, is long-term care insurance, where you purchase a policy specifically designed to cover these long-term care needs. Now, yes, I know long-term care insurance can be expensive. So the insurance isn't necessarily right for everyone, but it depends upon your situation, your retirement goals, as well as other factors. And yes, an income specialist can help you determine the right strategy for how you're going to pay for your long-term care needs should they arise. So how exactly do you start that process? Well, first, set your retirement goals if you haven't yet done so. Because once you've identified those goals, all your needs can become clearer, and you'll be able to prepare for them more accurately and more effectively. Second, explore the long-term care options and costs in the areas where you plan to retire. Identify your goals because that will tell you where everything else lies. And third, commit yourself to a holistic retirement plan. That means planning which focuses not just on your financial health, but equally as important, your mental health, your physical health. And although there's no guarantee you'll ever be able to avoid needing long-term care, you may improve your odds or at least limit your needs just by taking good care of yourself. And finally, make sure your financial plan isn't carrying too much risk, because one of the surest ways to jeopardize your ability to cover long-term care costs is to suffer a major financial loss. If your current strategy is vulnerable and is based upon growth, not interest or dividends, then it might put you at risk of spending down principal, and you can incur losses in your net worth very quickly. And again, an income specialist can help you reduce this risk by helping you create a strategy that fits your goals and your needs, including the potential need for long-term care. And I'm here with Jeff Small, president of Arbor Financial Services, as well as our guest, Greg McBride, senior vice president and chief financial analyst at bankrate.com. Greg, thanks so much for joining us today on The Income Generation.
Great to be with you again. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Greg, Jeff Small here. It's great to see you again. So, we've been in this inflationary environment. It doesn't seem to be no end in sight. Is it going to level off soon, or will it be an ongoing problem during the recovery?
Well, I don't think inflation is nearly as transitory as the Federal Reserve seems to think it is. I think when inflation will level off, but I think it's going to level off at a point higher than what we've become accustomed to. In the decade preceding the pandemic, inflation was in a 1.5% to 2% neighborhood. I expect that when the dust settles, we're probably looking at inflation in the 2.5% to 3% neighborhood for a while. Those supply chain constraints, I think, have persisted a lot longer than was initially expected.
And when do you think that dust will settle, Greg? Will it be the end of 2022? Might it be the end of 2023? What's your best guess?
I think we will see some of that dust settling throughout 2022. We're already seeing some of these more temporary items, prices that had spiked earlier this year, pulling back. And I think what we're likely to see going forward maybe is just broader number of categories seeing sustained price increases. So I think that unfolds over the course of, say, the next 12 months or so. But I think by the time we get to the end of 2022, that's where we start to see those inflation numbers still in that 2.5% to 3% neighborhood.
Okay. Now, it's interesting because, we have a lot of people recently who seem to have come out. For example, Kathy Wood from ARK Investments, who said really, ultimately, she's more worried about deflation than inflation. And that's something that I've been really concerned about since the financial crisis in 2008. So do you see that as being a significant possibility maybe a few years after this leveling out? Or do you think maybe we just stay at that 2 to 3% range, maybe as long as a decade?
I'm more of the opinion that we will go back to this ultra low rate, low inflation, flirting with deflation environment that encompassed much of the developed world in the years since the financial crisis. So, I think that 2.5% to 3% inflation, it'll stick around for a year or two, maybe even 3. But beyond that, that's where I think the things like demographics, the aging population, not just in the U.S. but in much of the developed world, I think that environment takes hold, and we're back to this ultra low rate environment and low inflation environment that preceded the pandemic.
So it's interesting. We had great economic growth coming with the inflation early on. Now it seems like the big inflation spike we've seen has actually surpassed the growth. But when we get to this 2.5% period, do you think that we're going to be rewarded for that 2.5% inflation for that 2-3 year period with extra economic growth, or is it going to be more of a stagflation type thing?
I'm not as worried about stagflation. I mean, because of the demographics, I think when that dust settles, we're still a slow growth economy. I mean, I think you see the economy, growing at a 2.5% rate, but that's after inflation. So, with that 2.5% to 3% inflation on a nominal basis, that means the economy's growing at 5.5%. percent, 6%, something in that neighborhood. So, I do think, we will still see sustainable economic growth, but I think at a more moderate pace, certainly not the bounce back pace that we've seen coming out of the pandemic.
And it sounds like ultimately then when you get out closer to maybe 2025, that's where you see those deflationary headwinds really kicking in, and maybe our economic growth going back to something that's akin to nil, right?
Yeah, that's about the time frame. I do think that the economic growth is likely to be sustained, just at more of a sluggish pace, a slower rate. And that's that environment where we once again confront the idea of deflation, ultra low rates, negative interest rates, those type of things that we've seen in much of the developed world over the last decade plus.
All right, so I guess all the cheap money out there is going to keep the party going for 3 or 4 more years. I certainly hope you're right. Greg, thanks so much for being back here with us. We really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm here with our special guest, Ellie Truckenbrodt. She's a long-term care and Medicare advisor at my very own practice, Scranton Financial Group in Connecticut. Ellie, you gotta love technology, right? I'm down here in the Florida office, you're in the Connecticut office, and we still get to see each other. Isn't this great?
Yeah, I love technology. It's a great thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here and helping us out with this, because as you know, you're the person, whenever I've got a Medicare or a long-term care question, I come to you because you know that what I know about this stuff could be probably fit on the top of someone's thumb, right? So first of all, why do you think, when people talk about planning for how they're going to pay for long-term care, they're going to self-insure, they're going to buy insurance, what are they going to do? Why is it something that's a topic they typically just put off? I got my ideas, but you deal with this more than me with all of our clients, so why?
Right. Well, in my experience, long-term care specifically is a very difficult subject for many people to talk about. It carries sort of this, this negative vibe, I guess is the best way to put it. It's aging, it's, getting older and needing help. All of those things are, pretty much in anybody's head a negative. So nobody really wants to talk about it, because whoever wants to talk about something that is a negative. So that's really what it is. And it's kind of a hurdle to get over. And then once it's, talked about, then people are more receptive to really understanding it and really wanting to learn about it. Because obviously it's something that, is going to be probably needed for most people, but mostly they see their parents age. They think, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a burden to my children. I don't want to do that. I'm going to be in a home somewhere. So it's really not something that most people want to think about.
Yeah. And you think about, when you start thinking about convalescent care, that's exactly it. I like to turn around and talk about home health care, that look, if something happens, you can plan now to make sure you could stay in the comfort of your home. If you don't plan, you may be forced into a convalescent facility, which of course nobody wants. But let me switch gears on you. Do you find that a lot of people still think that Medicare or maybe their Medicare supplement is going to cover them if they need convalescent care or full-time home health care?
Yes, I would agree with that. I think many people do believe that they would get some form of long-term care. Again, they always go back to my parents or somebody that they knew that transitioned maybe from a hospital into skilled nursing that was paid for up to a point. But Medicare, it's a bit of misinformation. Medicare does not pay for long-term care. It's specific to a skilled nursing facility. And it's only the first 20 days that are paid for at 100%. After the 20th day, you get up to 100 days, there's a very large copay that's involved. And I've seen many times where people will call in clients and say, oh my gosh, how am I going to pay this if I've gone beyond the 20 days? And most of these places, skilled nursing, more a long-term care facility, really actually want you to show proof of payment, or they want to see some assets. So, so Medicare No is not a long-term care solution financially at all.
20 days, 100 days with copays. So you better get well lickety split is the answer, and if you don't, then you're out of luck. So lastly, how about insurance? Some people can self-insure, right? They have enough money, they can do that. Some people have enough money to self-insure, still decide to buy insurance because they want to pass it off to an insurance company. But what can you tell people to get them to at least consider the insurance as early as possible and make a decision, yes or no? Because most people just procrastinate the decision for so long that either then it becomes too expensive because they're older, or they're not in good enough health to get it. So the goal, I think, is to get them to make that decision, yes or no, on insurance as early as possible. What are your best words of wisdom to those folks?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, early as possible. Insurance, it's all about insurance. The younger you are, obviously, the lower premium you're always going to pay when it comes to insurance. But also, people out there really need to understand the plans that are available today. The plans of yesterday, very, very different. They're almost like auto insurance. You pay and we never want you to get in an accident, but if you do, you're covered. If you never get in an accident, you've paid out money that you're insured, and there's comfort there. These plans are very, very different by design. So they're more asset-based. So the sooner that they think about getting into a plan, it's an asset-based plan. These premiums never, ever go up. Once it's paid, it's paid. Also, asset-based, meaning the monies that go into these types of policies actually come back to your estate if you don't use the money. So there's really low risk as far as what money you're putting out there as part of your retirement plan, but also there's tax advantages. So I might talk to somebody who says to me, well, I have an annuity and I'm going to be able to draw income off that annuity, and which is great. But if that same money were in a long-term care policy, the money coming out of a long-term care policy is actually non-taxable. So up to right now, per the IRS, it's right around or right over $10,000 a month, which makes a huge difference. And
for a lot of people who are retired, Ellie, as you know, income's more important than the amount of assets on their balance sheet. So if they can satisfy that need by transferring an asset versus by having a constant income drain that's going to last you for the rest of your life, I can see how that might be a more attractive approach. But bottom line, look at it early, look at it in your 50s, and make a decision once and for all. Am I doing it? Am I not doing it? Don't put off your decision, because the decision might get taken away from you as you age because of costs and health. Ellie Truckenbrodt, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks so much, Dave.
If you enjoyed this video, please click the thumbs up button and give us a like, and make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel for new content each and every week.